Slap! The sound echoes. Everyone freezes. Get out before I call security. The elderly woman slowly turns, her pearls glinting under the light. The music cuts. Silence. Evelyn. Calm but deadly, call whoever you like. But start with your boss. Beat of silence. She steps closer. Because I own this store. Bass drops. Gasps fill the room. The manager's face turns pale. The glass walls of Cole and Pierce Boutique, a luxury store known for its exclusivity and intimidating silence. The air smelled faintly of expensive perfume and polished marble. Behind the glass counters, sales associates whispered among themselves, dressed in black and beige, their smiles mechanical and shallow. Evelyn Brooks, a graceful woman in her late 70s, stepped inside holding her head high. Her grey curls framed her calm face, and her elegant cream sweater contrasted with her rich mahogany handbag. She walked slowly, taking in the display of handbags and jewelry like she had a long, familiar history with the place. But to everyone watching, she looked like someone who didn't belong. From across the room, Richard Cole, the sharply dressed store manager, noticed her immediately. His lips tightened into a thin line. He didn't recognize her, and that alone was enough to bother him. He straightened his tie and walked over, his polished shoes echoing off the marble floor. "Excuse me," he said, his tone sharp but sugar-coated. "May I help you? We don't usually allow unaccompanied visitors to handle the merchandise without a consultant present." Evelyn smiled softly. "I'm just browsing," she said kindly. "I've been here many times before." Richard's eyes narrowed. "Browsing?" He looked her up and down, his gaze lingering on her modest clothes. "Ma'am, these are limited edition items. They start at $6,000. I wouldn't want you to waste your time." Around them, a few customers turned their heads, sensing tension. Evelyn's expression didn't change. She adjusted the strap of her handbag and replied, "Young man, I assure you, my time is never wasted." That calm confidence made Richard's jaw tighten. He hated being challenged, especially in front of other customers. "Jake!" he barked, waving toward the large security guard stationed near the door. Officer Jake Turner stepped closer, his muscular frame towering over the elderly woman. Evelyn looked up at him, unfazed. "Is there a problem?" she asked softly. Richard sneered. "There might be. We've had incidents before, people pretending to be shoppers just to steal. I'd rather be safe than sorry." Gasps rippled through the store. A young woman near the counter whispered, "She doesn't look like a thief," but Richard ignored it. He reached past Evelyn and snatched the handbag she had been admiring. "This one's not for handling," he snapped, slamming it back on the counter. Evelyn flinched slightly, but her eyes stayed steady. "You're being very rude," she said, her voice trembling slightly but full of dignity. "You don't know who you're talking to." Richard leaned in close, his voice dripping with arrogance. "I know exactly who I'm talking to. Someone who clearly wandered into the wrong place." The moment stretched tight, like a wire ready to snap. Evelyn took a slow breath, ready to speak. But Richard, frustrated by her composure, suddenly lost control. "Don't talk back to me!" he yelled, and before anyone could stop him, his hand shot out, striking her across the face. The sound echoed through the boutique like a gunshot. Everything froze. The customers gasped. A woman dropped her phone. Even Jake, the security guard, hesitated, his hand still gripping Evelyn's arm as if unsure whether to let go or hold tighter. Evelyn stood perfectly still, her eyes closed for a moment as the sting spread across her cheek. The silence was deafening. Her grey curls trembled, but she didn't move. When she finally opened her eyes, there was no anger in them, just deep, chilling disappointment. "You shouldn't have done that," she said quietly. Richard's chest rose and fell with fury. "Get her out," he ordered Jake. "Now!" But Jake hesitated. Something about her tone made him pause. The other shoppers began whispering, filming on their phones. A few sales associates looked horrified. Evelyn slowly reached into her bag. "You think I came here to steal," she said softly. "But what you really stole today is your own dignity." Richard's face flushed red. "Enough with the nonsense. Leave now or I'll have you arrested." Evelyn took out a small leather folder and opened it, revealing a gleaming ownership certificate embossed with the store's golden logo. The color drained from Richard's face. "My name," she said, her voice echoing through the stunned boutique, "is Evelyn Brooks, and I don't just shop here, Mr. Cole." She stepped closer, holding his gaze with unshakable calm. "I own this place." The room erupted in gasps. Jake's grip fell away instantly. The sales associates froze, their faces pale. Richard stumbled backward, his mouth opening but no words coming out. Evelyn smoothed her sweater, her dignity fully intact, and looked around at the silent crowd. "You all saw what happened," she said quietly. "Let's see how Mr. Cole explains this to corporate, or should I say, to me." She turned toward the door, walking out with the same grace she had entered with, leaving behind a sea of stunned faces and a manager who had just destroyed his own career. The boutique that had once buzzed with the quiet hum of luxury now sat under a heavy blanket of silence. The moment Evelyn Brooks walked out, heads turned, whispers erupted, and the illusion of control Richard Cole clung to began to unravel. Richard's hand trembled slightly as he stared at the door she'd exited. His cheek twitched, and beads of sweat gathered near his temple. He'd built his career on arrogance, on making others feel small. But now, every set of eyes in the store was staring at him like he was something foul beneath their shoes. Officer Jake Turner stood frozen beside him. The once imposing guard looked uneasy, shifting from foot to foot. He'd never seen Richard lose control like that before. Jake's voice was low, hesitant. "Sir, you really hit her? In front of everyone?" Richard snapped out of his daze. "Watch your tone, Jake," he hissed, his voice cracking under the pressure. "That woman was... she was pretending. No one told me she owned the place. How was I supposed to know? Does it matter?" Jake replied quietly, glancing at the customers filming with their phones. "You struck an elderly woman, man. There's no coming back from that." Richard spun toward him, eyes blazing. "You think I'll let her ruin me?" "Not a chance. I'll call corporate myself. I'll explain it before she twists the story." He stormed toward his office at the back of the store, pushing past stunned employees who instinctively stepped away from him. The metallic click of his expensive shoes against the marble was the only sound that dared break the tense air. Meanwhile, whispers rippled across the boutique. "She owns it? Did you hear that?" She looked so calm, like she knew this would happen. "I got the whole thing on video." At the far end of the counter, Maya, a young sales associate who had always admired Evelyn's elegance, clutched her hands together. Tears welled in her eyes. She'd seen Richard's behavior before, the dismissive tone, the arrogance, but never this level of cruelty. She didn't deserve that, Maya whispered to her co-worker. He hit her for no reason. She was so kind. Richard slammed open his office door and dialed a number with shaking fingers. The phone rang once before a calm, professional voice answered. "Cole and Pierce Corporate Headquarters. This is Lillian. This is Richard Cole, store manager of the Madison Avenue branch," she said quickly. "I need to report a situation. One of our supposed customers made false ownership claims and—" "Mr. Cole," the voice interrupted, her tone suddenly changing to something sharper, colder. "Are you referring to Mrs. Evelyn Brooks?" Richard froze. "Yes, that's her." There was a pause. Then came the sentence that made his stomach drop. "Mrs. Brooks is the majority shareholder and co-founder of Cole and Pierce. She built this company before you were even hired." The blood drained from his face. "That's impossible," he stammered. She can't be—" "Mr. Cole," Lillian's voice was ice. "She personally selected your store to visit today. It was a discretionary audit. She wanted to observe customer service in person. You were informed in your quarterly memo that she often visits unannounced." The words slammed into him like blows. His knees went weak, and he sank into his chair. "I didn't know," he whispered, voice barely audible. "She didn't look—" "Careful," Lillian warned sharply. "Don't finish that sentence. Mrs. Brooks has already contacted us. The board is requesting your immediate suspension pending investigation." Richard's mind reeled. He thought about the cameras, the crowd, the gasps when his hand struck her face. His reputation wasn't just damaged. It was finished. "Please," he begged. "There must be a way to fix this. I've been here 7 years. I've grown this branch's sales." "Mr. Cole," Lillian interrupted again, her voice cold as stone. "Mrs. Brooks built the entire company. You built a store. There's a difference." The line went dead. Richard sat in silence, the world spinning around him. Outside his office window, he could see Jake talking quietly with the associates. The customers were leaving, shaking their heads. Every phone in the store was lighting up with notifications. The video was already spreading online. The headline forming in his imagination made him sick to his stomach. "Store manager slaps elderly black woman. Turns out she owns the company." Jake walked in slowly. "Sir," he said carefully, "corporate just called. They want you to close early. HR is on their way." Richard stood, trying to regain his composure. "No. I'll fix this. I'll apologize. But before he could finish, the glass doors at the front of the store swung open again. Evelyn Brooks stood there, poised and calm as ever. Her cheek still bore the faint red mark, but her eyes carried something far stronger: authority. Behind her were two people in suits, a woman from the board of directors and a corporate legal representative. The room went silent once more. Everyone turned. Cameras rose again, recording every second. Evelyn walked toward Richard, her heels clicking steadily across the floor. She stopped just inches from him, her presence alone silencing the man who had once shouted in her face. "Mr. Cole," she began softly, "I believe you owe me an explanation." Richard swallowed hard. "Mrs. Brooks, I didn't know who you were. I thought you were a thief," she finished, her tone measured but cutting. "A criminal? Someone who didn't deserve respect?" He stammered. "No, Evelyn raised her hand slightly, stopping him. "You see, that's the problem. You didn't need to know who I was to treat me with decency. But you chose arrogance over kindness, power over respect." The board member beside her stepped forward. "Mr. Cole," she said firmly, effective immediately, "your employment is terminated. You'll be escorted off the premises." Richard's world collapsed. He tried to speak, but his voice cracked. The same customers who had watched him humiliate Evelyn were now watching his downfall with stunned silence. Evelyn turned to the crowd, her voice steady and strong. "Let this be a reminder," she said. "Every face that walks through these doors deserves respect, whether they spend $1 or $1 million. She glanced once more at Richard. "You forgot that truth, but I never will." As security escorted Richard out, his reflection flickered in the glass display. The last image of a man who thought he owned power, only to realize power belonged to Grace. And Evelyn Brooks? She walked toward the front window, sunlight reflecting off her calm smile. For the first time in years she felt proud, not just as an owner, but as a woman who had stood her ground. The next morning, Cole and Pierce Boutique remained closed. Its glossy windows, once symbols of sophistication, were now veiled in silence and scandal. News vans lined the street, reporters eager to capture footage of the store that had become the center of a national uproar. The viral video of Richard Cole slapping Evelyn Brooks had reached every corner of the internet. But behind those glass doors, Evelyn Brooks sat quietly in her office, the same one that used to be Richard's. She looked out at the city skyline, a faint smile tugging at her lips. Despite the chaos outside, she exuded calm authority, like a queen who'd just reclaimed her throne. Her assistant, Maya, entered nervously, carrying a stack of folders. "Mrs. Brooks," she said softly, "the press is still outside. CNN, The Times, even local stations. They're all waiting for a statement." Evelyn turned, her grey curls glowing in the morning light. "Let them wait," she said gently. "I've waited my whole life for people to finally listen." Maya hesitated before asking, "Do you really plan to reopen the store after all that happened?" Evelyn smiled. "Of course. This place isn't the problem, Maya. People are. But people can change." She gestured for the young woman to sit. "Do you know how Cole and Pierce began?" Maya shook her head. "Not really. I only know it's been around since the 80s. Evelyn nodded, her eyes softening with memory. "That's right. 1984. Back when I was just a seamstress in Harlem. I couldn't afford luxury handbags, but I could make them. And I made them well. One day, a designer named Daniel Pierce saw my work. He was white, wealthy, and famous for his charm. He told me my designs were extraordinary and offered to partner with me." Maya leaned in, fascinated. Evelyn continued, her voice tinged with nostalgia. "I poured everything into this company, my savings, my nights, my hands. We started from a single workshop, and when Cole and Pierce became successful, people assumed it was all Daniel. They didn't even know there was a Brooks behind the brand." Her expression darkened for a moment. "Daniel passed away 20 years ago, and I stayed in the background, content to let others shine. I never cared for fame, only for the legacy. But somewhere along the way, the company lost its soul. They started hiring managers who valued image over integrity." She looked at Maya meaningfully. "Like Richard Cole." Maya's eyes dropped. "He was cruel, ma'am. To customers and employees. Everyone knew it, but we couldn't say anything. We needed our jobs." Evelyn's gaze softened. "And that's exactly why I came in unannounced. I wanted to see how my staff treated people when they didn't know who I was. Turns out, I didn't need cameras or a board meeting to find the truth, just to walk through my own store." A knock interrupted them. Officer Jake Turner stepped in, hat in hand. He looked uneasy, his uniform slightly rumpled. Mrs. Brooks, he said respectfully, I wanted to apologize again. I should have stopped him. I shouldn't have let him touch you. Evelyn studied him for a moment. You hesitated, she said, but you didn't act out of malice. You acted out of confusion and fear. The difference matters. Jake nodded. Still, I'd like to make it right. I've worked security for 10 years and I've never seen anything like that. I'm ready to testify or whatever you need. Evelyn smiled faintly. What I need, she said, is for you to remember this moment the next time you see injustice. Don't wait for someone else to act. Sometimes silence can be just as dangerous as the slap itself. Jake lowered his head. Yes, ma'am. When he left, Evelyn returned to the window. Outside, she could see reporters still waiting. For years, she'd hidden from the spotlight, letting others speak for her. But now, silence wasn't an option. Tell them I'll give a statement at noon, she told Maya. But I won't just talk about what happened to me. I'll talk about what happens to people like me every day, in stores, offices, and boardrooms. Maya smiled softly. People are going to listen, Mrs. Brooks. Evelyn nodded. They'll do more than listen, Maya. They'll change, or they'll be replaced. By noon, the boutique's front entrance was swarmed with cameras. The door opened, and Evelyn stepped out in a black coat, her posture regal and unshaken. The crowd erupted in flashes and questions. Mrs. Brooks, how do you feel about the incident? Will Richard Cole face charges? Are you stepping down as owner? Evelyn raised a hand and silence fell. Her voice carried effortlessly. What happened in that store was not about one slap, she began. It was about years of quiet disrespect. It was about the assumptions made when people see a face like mine in a place like this. But I am not here to punish. I am here to rebuild. She paused, letting her words sink in. Cole and Pierce will be restructured from the ground up. Training will change, leadership will change, and from today forward, this brand will not represent vanity, it will represent value. Value for people, for dignity, for respect. A murmur of approval rippled through the reporters. Evelyn's voice grew stronger. I own this place, she said proudly, but more importantly, I earned it. And I will never let arrogance destroy what hard work built. As she turned to leave, a reporter shouted, Mrs. Brooks, what would you say to Richard Cole if he were here now? Evelyn paused at the door, her hand resting lightly on the frame. I'd tell him, she said softly. Thank you for reminding me why I built this company in the first place. And with that she walked back inside, the cameras flashing behind her like lightning in a storm. By the following day, Richard Cole's name was everywhere, and not for the reasons he had once dreamed of. Social media had turned him into a villain overnight. News anchors replayed the video again and again, the slap, the gasp, the shock, when Evelyn Brooks calmly revealed, I own this place. The world was mesmerized and outraged. Richard sat alone in his high-rise apartment, blinds drawn, TV flickering. His phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Journalists, ex-colleagues, even old friends demanding comments or offering hollow sympathy. Every time he looked at the screen, another headline appeared. Luxury store manager fired after assaulting black owner. Arrogance meets karma. Evelyn Brooks becomes symbol of dignity. He switched off the TV, but the silence was worse. For years he'd lived on control, barking orders, demanding perfection, feeding on fear, but now the control was gone. The empire he thought he ran had crumbled under the truth he refused to see. A knock sounded at the door. Richard tensed. He hadn't expected anyone. When he opened it, Officer Jake Turner stood there, still in uniform, holding a small envelope. What do you want? Richard muttered bitterly. Jake shifted awkwardly. You left this at the store, he said, holding out the envelope. Thought I'd return it before I hand in my notice. Richard frowned. You're quitting? Jake nodded. Yeah. I can't stay there after what happened. Mrs. Brooks gave me a second chance, but I can't face that building every day. Not after seeing what we did. Richard scoffed, but his voice lacked conviction. She's milking this for PR. Don't act like she's some saint. Jake's eyes hardened. You don't get it, do you? She isn't milking anything. She's showing grace, something you clearly never learned. That woman could have pressed charges. She could have destroyed you publicly, but she didn't. Richard looked away. His throat tightened. You think that makes me feel better? Jake sighed. No, but maybe it should make you think. He placed the envelope on the table and left without another word. When Richard finally opened it, he found a handwritten note from Evelyn Brooks herself. Here, Mr. Cole, I built this company on respect, not image. You forgot that along the way. But I believe people can change, even those who fall hardest. You've lost your position, not your chance at redemption. The world will move on. The question is, will you? Evelyn Brooks Richard stared at the letter for a long time. No anger, no threat, just truth. And somehow that cut deeper than any punishment ever could. Meanwhile, at Cole and Pierce headquarters, the company buzzed with a renewed sense of purpose. Evelyn's speech had gone viral, not as a scandal, but as a turning point. Customers were calling to express admiration, investors were offering support. But Evelyn wasn't celebrating. She sat in her office late that evening, the city lights glowing beyond the tall glass windows. Her assistant, Maya, knocked softly before entering. "Mrs. Brooks," she said gently, "the board meeting's over. Everyone's behind your reform plan." "You did it." Evelyn smiled faintly. "No, Maya, we did it. But this isn't about victory. It's about accountability." She closed the folder she'd been reading. A report on workplace diversity and misconduct cases across all stores. The numbers were sobering. "Do you see this?" she said, tapping the paper. "For every incident like mine, there are dozens more we never hear about. We're changing that." Maya nodded. "We already scheduled empathy training and new hiring policies. The staff is actually excited. They said it feels different this time." Evelyn leaned back in her chair, the weight of years of silence pressing on her shoulders. "Good. It's about time people realize luxury isn't what you wear, it's how you treat others." That night, Evelyn attended a private dinner with journalists and community leaders. Cameras flashed as she entered, dignified in a simple black gown. The audience rose in applause, not because she was a CEO, but because she represented something greater, dignity standing tall against prejudice. During her speech, her voice trembled slightly with emotion. When that man raised his hand, she said, "He didn't just see an elderly woman, he saw someone who, in his eyes, didn't belong. But I've spent my life creating spaces where everyone belongs. And I won't stop now." Applause thundered through the hall. A reporter asked, "Mrs. Brooks, have you spoken with Mr. Cole since his termination?" Evelyn paused. "Not yet," she admitted. "But forgiveness isn't a gift for him. It's freedom for me. I refuse to carry bitterness. I carry lessons." She smiled softly, adding, "And maybe one day he'll learn his own." Meanwhile, Richard sat alone on a park bench, Evelyn's letter still folded in his hand. Around him, people scrolled through their phones, whispering his name, pointing discreetly. But for once he didn't snap back or hide. He looked up at the skyline and thought about her words, "You've lost your position, not your chance at redemption." For the first time in years, Richard felt something unfamiliar. Humility. He realized power wasn't in titles or tailored suits. It was in respect, something Evelyn had, even when the world turned against her. He stood slowly, determination flickering in his eyes. "Maybe it's not too late," he whispered. Later that night, Evelyn received an email from an unknown address. Subject, acknowledgement. "Mrs. Brooks, you don't owe me forgiveness, but I owe you an apology. I'm starting over, volunteering at a community outreach center, one that helps train unemployed youth in retail management. Maybe I'll finally learn what leadership really means. Thank you for showing me what strength looks like." Richard Cole. Evelyn read it quietly, then closed her laptop. She didn't smile, but her heart felt lighter. People could change, slowly, painfully, but truly, she whispered into the empty office. "Good. Let that be the beginning." Outside, the city lights shimmered like distant stars, reminders that even after the darkest storms, grace can still shine. A full month had passed since the day the slap echoed through the marble halls of Cole and Pierce. The scandal that once threatened to destroy the brand had instead become the heartbeat of its rebirth. Inside the boutique, sunlight glowed through spotless glass panes. The air no longer felt cold or pretentious. It hummed with new life. A young man of 20 helped a grandmother choose a scarf. A woman in a wheelchair laughed softly with a smiling cashier. The place that once reeked of judgment now breathed belonging. At the center of it all, Evelyn Brooks stood watching, her cane lightly touching the floor, her eyes misty with pride. Her store had finally become what she'd always dreamed it could be, a reflection of humanity, not hierarchy. "Mrs. Brooks?" She turned to see Maya, now promoted to store director. The young woman's eyes glowed with excitement. "The first community scholarship applications are in. Over 200 people applied." Evelyn's smile warmed the room. 200 futures, she murmured. "That's more than handbags and sales. That's legacy." Under Evelyn's direction, Cole and Pierce had launched a bold initiative, the Brooks Foundation, a program to fund education for underprivileged youth interested in design, business, and retail management. Every store was now required to partner with local community programs. including one run by a very unexpected volunteer. Maya handed Evelyn a folder. "There's one application I thought you might want to see personally." Evelyn raised an eyebrow and opened it. Inside was a photograph of Richard Cole wearing a simple collared shirt, standing among a group of young trainees at a community center. His once hard features had softened. There was humility in his smile. Attached was a handwritten note. "Dear Mrs. Brooks, you once said people can change. I hope I'm proving that true. I've been teaching classes on professionalism and empathy. The kids are sharp, and they're teaching me more than I could ever teach them. If you ever visit, I'd be honored to shake your hand properly this time." Richard Evelyn stared at the letter for a long moment, her chest swelling with something that felt like both pride and peace. She looked up at Maya, who waited curiously. "What do you think?" Maya asked. "I think," Evelyn said softly, "he's finally learning what power really means." That afternoon, Evelyn decided to visit the community center unannounced, just as she had visited her own store weeks before. The drive was quiet, her thoughts steady. When she arrived, laughter spilled from inside the building. Through the glass doors, she saw Richard, surrounded by a group of teenagers demonstrating customer service techniques using mock scenarios. They were laughing, learning, confident. He didn't see her at first. She stood quietly watching him explain, "Respect isn't about who's in charge, it's about who shows up." When class ended, Richard noticed her standing there. His face paled, but he quickly straightened, walking over with measured humility. "Mrs. Brooks," he said softly. "I wasn't expecting—" "I know," she interrupted with a gentle smile, "but I wanted to see for myself." He nodded, eyes lowering. "I'm still ashamed for what I did." Evelyn tilted her head. "Shame only matters if it leads to growth. From what I see, it did." He exhaled slowly, visibly relieved. "You gave me a second chance, when you didn't have to." Evelyn's eyes softened. "The truth is, Mr. Cole, I didn't give you a second chance. You took one for yourself, and that's the hardest thing anyone can do." For a moment, neither spoke. The sound of children's laughter echoed through the hall, pure, unguarded, full of hope. Evelyn extended her hand. "For the record," she said, "this is how you greet your employer and your fellow human being." Richard's voice cracked as he took her hand. "Thank you," he whispered. "No," she said kindly. "Thank you for proving that people can rise after falling." Months later, Cole and Pierce held its 40th anniversary gala in New York City. The ballroom shimmered with lights, but this time it wasn't about opulence. The guests weren't just investors and celebrities. They were students, employees, single mothers, veterans, and dreamers whose lives the Brooks Foundation had touched. Evelyn stood at the podium, applause echoing around her. She wore a sleek silver gown, her hair elegantly pinned, her presence commanding yet warm. 40 years ago, she began, her voice strong and clear. "This company was built from the stitches of a dream. I was a seamstress who believed that beauty should never belong to the few. It should be shared with the world. But somewhere along the way, we lost sight of that. We forgot that true luxury isn't gold or silk. It's grace." The audience hung on her every word. "When I walked into that store last month, I saw arrogance where there should have been empathy. But what followed taught me, and all of us, something invaluable. Mistakes can destroy, but they can also rebuild." Her eyes scanned the crowd, landing on Richard sitting near the back, humble but proud. Their gazes met briefly, a silent acknowledgement that redemption was real. Evelyn continued, "From this day on, Cole and Pierce will not just sell products. We will invest in people. For every dollar we earn, a portion will go toward education, opportunity, and equality." Thunderous applause erupted. Cameras flashed, tears glistened, and Maya, standing backstage, smiled like a proud daughter. Evelyn closed her speech with words that would echo across the internet for weeks to come. Power means nothing without compassion. Success means nothing without humility. And legacy means nothing without love. When the lights dimmed and the music began, Evelyn slipped away from the crowd and stood by the window overlooking the city she had once feared to dream in. The skyline glittered. The same city that had once looked down on her now sparkled at her feet. She whispered to herself, "Mama, I did it." Her mother's old words echoed in her heart. "One day, baby, they'll see your worth, but make sure you never forget it yourself." Evelyn smiled. For the first time in decades, she truly felt peace. She turned toward the laughter, the music, and the hum of celebration, walking forward, cane tapping lightly on the marble floor. And as she moved through the crowd, past workers, students, and leaders who owed their second chances to her courage, one truth became crystal clear: respect isn't owned, it's earned. and Evelyn Brooks had earned hers forever.